Imagine a young king ravaged by leprosy, leading a kingdom besieged by enemies on all sides. Now imagine this same king making crucial decisions about fortresses that would define the fate of Jerusalem. In today's video, we will delve into a rarely discussed yet extremely revealing episode of the 12th century's geopolitical complexity, the Siege of Darum, which took place during the decade of 1170 in the heart of southern Palestine. In this video, you will discover how an apparently peripheral fortress became a vital flashpoint between the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Muslim forces led by Saladin. We will understand why Darham was so coveted, what strategies were employed by Baldwin and his enemies, and what this siege reveals about the power struggle between Christians and Muslims in the Holy Land. Stay with us until the end, because we will explore not only the military conflict, but also the diplomatic backstage, the intrigues among nobles, and the burden that a sick young king carried on his shoulders. You won't want to miss it. In the 12th century, the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem was constantly threatened by rising Muslim forces. After the founding of the kingdom in 1099, frontier fortresses became essential to hold back enemy advances and protect pilgrimage and trade routes. During the decade of 1170, the young Baldwin IV, newly crowned and already afflicted by leprosy, faced the challenge of governing a fragile and internally divided territory. While Saladin was consolidating his power in Egypt and Syria, and Darum, located to the south, was a strategic piece on this volatile chessboard. The fortress of Darum was situated on the edges of the Negev desert, a few leagues from Gaza, and was a vital outpost between Egypt and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Its strategic location allowed control over the commercial and military routes linking the Nile Valley to the Crusader cities. It was, therefore, not just a matter of stone and mortar. Darum symbolized control over the southern access to Palestine. Around 1179, at a time when Baldwin was consolidating his authority as king, the Muslim armies, under Saladin's indirect command, began to threaten the fortress. Saladin, then Sultan of Egypt and Lord of Damascus, sought to weaken Christian resistance through swift campaigns focused on vulnerable points of the Crusader kingdom. Darum was an ideal target. Baldwin, still young and under 20 years old, but already experienced in military matters and deeply aware of the strategic importance of that position, acted swiftly. He gathered forces from Jerusalem, Ascalon, and the county of Tripoli, counting on the support of Templar and Hospitaller knights. The Crusader response was not merely defensive. It was a move to reaffirm authority in the face of Saladin's growing pressure and to prevent the collapse of the southern frontier. Chroniclers of the time, such as William of Tyre, describe with admiration the determination of the young king, who, even afflicted by advanced leprosy, personally appeared on the battlefield. His presence served as inspiration to his soldiers and as a warning to the nobles who doubted his leadership abilities. Baldwin knew that maintaining the kingdom's internal cohesion also depended on his public image as a warrior monarch. The siege intensified with the approach of the Egyptian forces, and for several days, Darum was on the verge of surrender. However, thanks to the coordinated action of the Christian forces and the intelligent use of the desert terrain with ambushes and targeted skirmishes, it was possible to temporarily repel the attackers. Baldwin ordered additional fortification of the walls and the reorganization of the garrison, ensuring a stronger defense for future confrontations. It is important to highlight that although Saladin was not personally present at this specific siege, his policy of harassing Christian fortresses was part of a broader plan of attrition. He knew that weakening the supply lines and communication networks of the Crusaders was the safest path to reclaiming Jerusalem, a goal he would ultimately achieve later in 1187. The uncertain outcome of the siege of Darum, although it avoided an immediate catastrophe for the Crusaders, left a trail of unrest that would echo through the following years. The maintenance of the fortress, though successful, revealed the limitations of a kingdom under pressure on multiple fronts, and more so, of a king whose body was wasting away before the eyes of his subjects. Baldwin, despite the partial victory, knew that Darham remained vulnerable. Shortly after the siege, he initiated a series of logistical and defensive reforms in the southern part of the kingdom. He ordered the reinforcement of towers, the continuous supply of provisions, and the reactivation of watch posts along the desert. The fortress came to rely on a rotating garrison of Templar knights, which highlighted the king's growing dependence on military orders to maintain the integrity of the territory. On the political front, the siege exposed internal tensions. Some barons of the kingdom questioned the resources spent to defend an isolated fortress like Darum, instead of reinforcing larger urban centers like Jerusalem or Acre. Baldwin, however, understood war as a game of anticipation and influence. Holding Darham was a direct message to Saladin. The kingdom of Jerusalem still stood, and under his leadership would not yield easily. From the Muslim perspective, the episode served as a lesson for future engagements. Saladin, although he did not gain immediate control of the fortress, identified there the vulnerability of the Crusaders when dispersed. He would increasingly adopt strategies of prolonged siege and coordinated attacks, waiting for the right moment when the internal exhaustion of the Crusader kingdom would make it an easier prey. The figure of Baldwin emerges from this episode even more complex. On one hand, the tenacity of a king who not only appeared on the battlefield, but also made strategic decisions that ensured the survival of his kingdom is admirable. On the other hand, the siege of Darum laid bare the inevitable decline of his health. Leprosy was already robbing him of his movements more rapidly, and his advisors began to discuss, behind the scenes, the matter of his succession. According to contemporary accounts, such as that of William of Tyre, Baldwin is said to have shown an almost superhuman serenity after the siege, gathering his barons in Jerusalem to discuss the future of the kingdom. More than a military leader, Baldwin presented himself as a sovereign conscious of his historical role and the finitude of his presence. The siege of Darum, then, was not merely a territorial battle, but also a turning point in the trajectory of the leper king, at a moment when the fight against external enemies intertwined with the internal struggle against disease and political instability. In the following weeks, Saladin reorganized his campaigns, choosing to concentrate his forces further north, while Darum, although saved, became a symbol of solitary resistance in a kingdom that was beginning to fragment. Baldwin, for his part, would spend the following years between military campaigns and strategies of political survival, trying to maintain the cohesion of a kingdom surrounded by threats. Thus, the siege of Darum is not just an episode of war, but a reflection of Baldwin's own dilemma, to resist even in the face of the inevitable. The siege of Darham reminds us that history is not always written through great victories, but often through acts of resistance in the face of adversity. Baldwin the Leper King proved that leadership does not depend solely on physical strength, but on moral courage and strategic vision. By keeping Darham under Christian control, even if temporarily, he bought time for his kingdom and sent a silent warning to Saladin. Jerusalem still had a defender willing to fight to the end. This episode invites us to reflect on the burden of ruling in times of war, on the difficult decisions made behind walls about to collapse, and on the fragility of a body that, though marked by disease, upheld the hope of an entire people. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the siege of Darum and the fascinating figure of Baldwin, like the video, share it with those who love medieval history, and comment below. What other episode from the life of the Leper King would you like to see here? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters of this epic journey through the Crusades and the backstage of faith and politics in the 12th century. See you next time.